Apollo13 stayed behind on Casper.
Oh, Houston, Sweet 16 has arrived.
They almost didn't get to land. After the separation of Casper and Orion, the command module developed a vibrational problem. This was caused by a malfunction of the backup steering system. Under NASA rules, both primary and backup systems were to be operational for lunar landing. Casper and Orion rendezvoused and orbited in formation while the problem was solved.
To me, the most exciting moment was the actual landing on the moon. As a pilot, it was the most dynamic. You're coming in to land in a place you'd never landed before. You weren't really sure the slopes of the terrain and how this thing was going to handle when you got down low. Even though we were the fifth and we had all of the experience of the prior missions, it was still a new landing area. And so to me, the landing was on the moon was the most exciting.
Wow! Oh, man! Orion is finally here, Houston. Fantastic!
During the mission's 3 EVAs, Young and Duke set up 10 lunar surface experiments. The most important of these was the far ultraviolet camera and spectroscope. This mechanism took advantage of the lack of lunar atmosphere to collect UV rays emitted from celestial objects, including the Earth. Young also rough-tested the lunar rover for the benefit of NASA's engineers while Duke filmed the proceedings.
Man, you are really bouncing. Is he on the ground at all? That's 10 kilometers. Huh? He's got about 2 wheels on the ground. Okay, turn sharp. I have no desire to turn sharp. Okay, here's a Sharpie. Hey, that's great. He's a big rooster tail out of all 4 wheels. And as he turns, he skids. The back end breaks loose just like on snow. Come on back, John. Hey, the deck is running. Man, I'll tell you, Indy's never seen a driver like this. Okay, when he hits the craters and starts bouncing is when he gets his rooster tail. He makes sharp turns.
7.5 months after Orion lifted into the lunar darkness, Apollo17 became the only night launch of the program. Gene Cernan, like John Young on the previous mission, would finally have an opportunity to walk on the moon. Apollo-17's target was Taurus Littrow on the southeast corner of the Sea of Serenity. With Cernan in the lunar module Challenger was geologist Jack Schmitt, the first professional scientist to visit the moon. Above them, command module pilot Ron Evans maintained the equipment aboard America. Apollo-17 was to be the crowning achievement of the program, and the crew did not disappoint. Theirs was a record-setting mission. At 12 days, 13 hours, and 51 minutes, it was the longest voyage. It was the longest time spent on the surface of the moon, and the longest spent on EVAs. Cernan and Schmitt left Challenger for 3 work periods, each time for more than 7 hours. They traveled 21 miles in the 3rd lunar rover. And they returned with a record load of moon material, 243 pounds. Scattered throughout these accomplishments were the same periods of playfulness that had been part of the previous moonwalks.
I was strolling on the moon one day in the merry, merry month of December. Now, May's the month. May, that's right. May is the year of the month.
Each flight had and each part of every flight was special, I think, for each one of us. I suppose if you want to zero in on something that people get more interested in is the fact that when that engine lights, when you lift off the surface of the moon, you're a long way from home, and a lot of things got to happen, but at least you're beginning to, in spite of the fact that you had a good time, you're at least headed in the right direction.
At 5:55 p.m. on Thursday, December 14, 1972, Challenger lifted from the surface. Humans would not return for the remainder of the century. 12 men spent a total of 80 hours and 26 minutes walking on the moon. They brought back more than 800 pounds of it. The final 3 Apollo missions, 18 through 20, had been canceled in 1970. As far back as Apollo 14, the astronauts knew that 17 would be the last. In the wake of the cancellations, however, had come the promise of new challenges: a manned orbiting space station and a reusable spacecraft. During 1973 and 1974, 3 Skylab missions were flown. Pete Conrad and Alan Bean commanded the first 2. When the space shuttle became a reality, John Young was the first to command a mission, 30 years to the day after Yuri Gagarin's flight. Ken Mattingly also commanded the shuttle twice. In between Skylab and the shuttle was one last Apollo flight. Officially designated Apollo 18, it went not to the moon, but to an Earth orbit link-up with the Soviet Soyuz spacecraft. Apollo 10 veteran Tom Stafford was joined by astronaut Vance Brand and by Stafford's old boss, Deke Slayton. Slayton had followed Alan Shepard's lead and had undergone a procedure that enabled him to fly again. His presence and that of the Soviet cosmonauts made Apollo-Soyuz a fitting epilogue to the Apollo program. The race to the moon had been political, its hurdles technological, its triumphs communal. But the momentum that kept it going was scientific. The benefits of space exploration are near us every day, from computers to scratch-resistant sunglasses. Other dividends include laser cutters, high-speed data transfer systems, improved insulation, new lubricants, robots and synthesized speech, heat-resistant paints, spun glass fiber, fireproof materials, improved solar energy systems, metallized plastic packaging, and highway crash barriers, not to mention numerous medical advances and the microelectronics in most of our home appliances. What began as a race between opposing nations ended up improving conditions for all humanity. Everyone remembers Neil Armstrong's first steps on the moon and the words he spoke. Few remember the final speeches just 3.5 years later. The task of summing up the Apollo program fell to Gene Cernan as he stood on the surface of Earth's nearest neighbor.
As I take man's last step from the surface, back home for some time to come, but we believe not too long into the future, I'd like to just let what I believe history will record, that America's challenge of today has forged man's destiny of tomorrow. And as we leave the moon in Taurus Littrow, we leave as we came, and God willing, as we shall return, with peace and in hope for all mankind. One, ignition. We're on our way, Houston. Vector good. Roger, you have good thrust. 130 Houston, we're in the blind and we'll go.